It was a quiet evening when Marcus Brown, a decorated Army sergeant, stopped at a neighborhood gas station on his way home. Still in his pressed military uniform, he carried himself with the calm discipline that years of service had etched into his demeanor. To the cashier and regulars who often saw him pass through, Marcus was a familiar, respected face. But to two police officers who arrived moments later, all they saw was suspicion. The officers entered the station briskly, eyes narrowing as they scanned Marcus. One of them barked sharply, "What's this? Impersonating military personnel now?" Marcus turned, startled by the accusation. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice steady though confused. The taller officer pointed at Marcus's uniform with disdain. "You're not fooling anyone. Where'd you get that? Army surplus? You think it's funny to dress like a soldier?" Marcus blinked, almost in disbelief. "I am a soldier," he replied calmly, showing no hostility. "Sergeant Marcus Brown, U.S. Army. I just came off duty." But the officers weren't listening. Instead, they closed in, their tone dripping with condescension. "Save the story," one muttered. Without hesitation, they ordered him to place his hands behind his back. Marcus protested firmly but respectfully, repeating his name and service branch. Yet before he could even reach for his ID, the cold metal of handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The gas station fell silent. A few customers froze, watching the scene unfold, while others slipped out the door to avoid confrontation. The cashier looked torn, recognizing Marcus but too afraid to speak up against uniformed officers. The humiliation cut deeper than the steel biting into his wrists. Marcus had endured harsh training, grueling deployments, and the chaos of battlefields, but never had he felt so stripped of dignity as he did standing there, accused of lying about the very identity he had sacrificed years to honor. "Impersonating an officer is a federal crime," one officer sneered as they pushed him toward the door. "You're going to regret this little stunt." Marcus held his head high despite the stares of strangers. His training kept his voice calm even under the weight of insult. "I don't need to impersonate anyone," he said evenly. "I earned this uniform." Yet his words fell on deaf ears. The officers were convinced of their narrative, blind to the truth standing before them. They shoved him into the squad car outside, ignoring his request to retrieve his military ID from his wallet. Inside the cruiser, Marcus exhaled slowly, steadying himself. His honor had been questioned, his freedom taken, yet he knew one thing with certainty: this injustice would not stand for long. For while the officers believed they had caught a fraud, Marcus knew one phone call could change everything, and soon they would learn exactly who they had put in chains. Sitting stiffly in the back of the squad car, Marcus kept his composure. Rage simmered beneath the surface, but years of military discipline taught him not to let anger control his actions. The cuffs dug into his wrists, a cruel reminder that he had been reduced from respected soldier to suspect in mere minutes. One officer leaned back through the open door, smirking. "You're going away for a while, faker. We don't tolerate clowns who mock the service." Marcus met his gaze without flinching. "I've given my life to the service," he replied firmly, "and one call will prove it." They laughed, brushing him off. But Marcus knew exactly who to dial. With difficulty, he maneuvered his phone from his pocket and tapped a number burned into his memory. On the second ring, a deep, commanding voice answered. "Colonel Briggs speaking." Marcus exhaled, relief washing over him. "Sir, it's Sergeant Brown. I've been detained by local police. They claim I'm impersonating military personnel." A dangerous silence hung for half a beat before the colonel's tone dropped to steel. "Where are you right now, Sergeant?" Marcus gave the address. Briggs didn't waste another second. "Hold tight. Do not say another word to them. I'll be there immediately." The line went dead. Minutes felt like hours as Marcus sat handcuffed, listening to the officers outside mockingly discuss how they had caught a wannabe. But their bravado crumbled the moment a convoy of black SUVs pulled up, lights flashing. Out stepped Colonel Richard Briggs, a towering figure in full uniform, his very presence commanding silence. The colonel strode straight to the squad car, his gaze locked on the officers. "Who arrested this man?" he barked, his voice booming across the lot. The two officers stiffened. "We detained him for impersonating, sir. He was in uniform." Briggs cut him off with a glare that could cut glass. "Impersonating? That man is Sergeant Marcus Brown, decorated soldier, combat veteran, and one of my finest men. You put him in chains." The officers stammered, their confidence draining. "We had reason to believe. You had reason to harass a man for the color of his skin, while he wore the very uniform that defends your right to wear that badge," Briggs thundered. "You disgraced this department, and you disgraced this country." With a sharp gesture, the colonel ordered the cuffs removed. Marcus rubbed his wrists, rising slowly, head held high. The crowd that had gathered outside the station began to murmur, some applauding quietly as they realized the truth. Colonel Briggs wasn't finished. He leaned in close to the officers, his voice low but venomous. "You'll answer for this. Effective immediately, you're relieved of duty until further notice. I'll see to it myself." For the first time that evening, Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. The phone call had done exactly what he knew it would, shift the entire balance of power. And the officers who mocked him were only beginning to face the storm they had unleashed. By the time the handcuffs clicked open and Marcus stepped free, a small crowd had gathered at the gas station. What had begun as quiet curiosity had swelled into an audience of witnesses. Phones raised, cameras flashing, voices buzzing with disbelief at what they had just seen. The contrast was stark. Two police officers shrinking under scrutiny, and a soldier standing tall, his honor restored. Colonel Briggs turned toward the onlookers. "For those recording, make sure you capture this clearly," he declared. "This man is Sergeant Marcus Brown, United States Army. He has served this country with courage and distinction. Tonight, he was unlawfully humiliated by officers who abused their authority." The words lit a fire in the crowd. Applause broke out, shouts of support echoing across the lot. "Respect the uniform," one man yelled. "Justice for the sergeant," cried another. What had started as a scene of degradation had transformed into a moment of vindication, with Marcus at its center. The two officers, red-faced and visibly shaken, tried to explain themselves, but Briggs silenced them with a raised hand. "Not another word. You've done enough damage." He made a quick call to internal affairs, his clipped tone leaving no doubt about the seriousness of the situation. Within minutes, the officers were escorted away, not as enforcers of the law, but as disgraced men stripped of their authority. Meanwhile, Marcus stood quietly, scanning the crowd with steady eyes. Though vindicated, the sting of the humiliation hadn't left him. He thought of how easily this could have gone differently if not for a single phone call and a powerful ally. But before he could dwell on it, members of the community approached him. "Thank you for your service, Sergeant," said an older man, shaking his hand firmly. A young woman added, "I'm so sorry this happened to you. You didn't deserve it." Others echoed similar sentiments, their support washing over Marcus like a bomb against the earlier sting of injustice. And then came the viral moment. James, a college student in the crowd, uploaded the full footage to social media. It showed everything: the arrest, the humiliation, the colonel's fiery arrival, and Marcus's eventual release. Within hours, the video spread across platforms, gathering millions of views. Hashtags calling for accountability trended nationwide. News outlets scrambled to cover the story. Headlines blared, "Soldier handcuffed by police, rescued by his commander, and from humiliation to justice. Viral arrest sparks outrage." The officers' names were plastered across screens, their reputations shredded overnight. But for Marcus, the moment wasn't about fame or vindictiveness. As he stood beside Colonel Briggs, he simply felt gratitude that truth had prevailed in the open, where no one could deny it. Yet he also knew this was not the end. The city, the department, and the nation itself would now have to confront a deeper question. If this could happen to a uniformed soldier, how many others had suffered in silence without a colonel to step in? The reckoning had begun. The following days brought a whirlwind of response. By sunrise, the viral video had reached every major news outlet in the country. Commentators debated the incident, activists demanded reform, and veterans voiced outrage at seeing one of their own treated with such disrespect. The city's leadership had no choice but to act. At a press conference, the mayor stood solemnly beside Colonel Briggs and Marcus. "On behalf of this city," she began, "I offer a full apology to Sergeant Marcus Brown and to the entire military community. What happened at that gas station was unacceptable, an abuse of authority, and a betrayal of the values we are sworn to uphold." She paused, looking directly at Marcus. "Your dignity was attacked, but your courage reminded us what service truly means. We will not allow this injustice to go unanswered." The two officers at the center of the scandal were swiftly dismissed from the force, their badges revoked, and their actions cited as violations of both policy and human decency. Internal investigations expanded into other misconduct complaints, and for once, the department faced real pressure to reform. But Marcus's story did not end with an apology or firings. Weeks later, he was invited to speak at the police academy, where recruits trained to one day wear the very badges disgraced by those officers. Standing before a room of wide-eyed cadets, Marcus wore his uniform proudly, every crease sharp, every medal gleaming. He spoke not with anger, but with conviction. When you put on a uniform, whether it's a soldier's or an officer's, you carry more than fabric. You carry trust. You carry responsibility. And that trust can be broken in a second if you use your power to belittle instead of protect. The room hung on his every word. He wasn't preaching revenge. He was teaching respect, discipline, and humility. His message was clear. True authority wasn't about intimidation, but service. Claudine, a retired veteran in the audience, later remarked that Marcus's words struck deeper than any lecture she'd heard in her years of training. "He reminded them," she said, "that dignity is sacred, yours and everyone else's." For Marcus, life returned to a new kind of normal. People recognized him now, thanked him for his service more often, sometimes even asked for photos. But beneath it all, he remained the same man who had simply stopped for gas that evening. The same man who refused to let humiliation define him. And though the memory of being handcuffed unjustly still lingered, it was no longer a wound. It was a reminder that truth, when spoken aloud and supported by courage, could dismantle lies and expose arrogance. For the officers who thought a uniform was just cloth that could be mocked, the lesson was harsh. But for Marcus, and for the city that watched him rise above, the incident became proof of something greater. Strength is not in the badge, nor even in the rank. It is in the character of the one who wears it.